Hi, this is Matt Baker. As I'm sure you know by now, the Catholic Church has a new pope, and for the first time ever, he's from the United States, former Cardinal Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV. For most people, his election was quite the surprise. For example, in my own video, I chose these 5 cardinals as the most likely to be chosen. Obviously, I was wrong. However, based on looking at previous conclaves, I did point out the following. Leading candidates rarely win. Candidates considered very liberal or very conservative rarely win. And candidates who are very similar to the previous pope rarely win. Well, the election of Prevost certainly fits these criteria. However, in this video, I'm not going to look at what kind of pope Leo XIV might be. Instead, I'm going to show you his family tree. Like most Americans, Prevost has a mixed ethnic background. In his case, he has ancestors from Italy, France, the Caribbean, and Africa. But let's start with his immediate family. Robert is the youngest of 3 brothers, all of whom grew up in Chicago. His eldest brother, Louis, served in the U.S. Navy and then worked for Snap-on Tools before retiring in Florida. Unlike the new pope, he's been described as a typical mega guy and was known for posting controversial things on social media, something that he probably won't be doing from now on. The pope's other brother, John, still lives in Chicago. He too is retired but was previously a principal at St. Gabriel Catholic School. Also working in education was the pope's uncle, Dr. John Prevost, as well as the pope's father, Louis Prevost Sr. His Uncle John obtained a PhD in Romance languages, specializing in French, and went on to work at both the University of Detroit and Wayne State University. As for the Pope's father, well, he started out in the Navy during World War II, where he commanded one of the landing ships on D-Day. Then, after the war, he went on to serve as both a principal and the superintendent of a public school district. His wife Mildred, the Pope's mother, was also a bookish type, quite literally. She was a librarian and held a master's degree, a rare feat for women from her generation. She had 5 sisters, 2 of whom became nuns. Now, before I move on, I want to tell you about the website and app that I personally use to follow important people like Pope Leo XIV. It's called Ground News, and for every major news story, it collects articles from around the world so that you can compare how the topic is being covered by both location and political leaning. For example, they recently gathered over 3,000 articles about the Pope's meeting with J.D. Vance. By the way, you can follow along at home by scanning the QR code on screen or by clicking the link in the description below. Sources on the left were more likely to mention how the meeting might impact upcoming peace talks, whereas sources on the right were more likely to focus on how Vance invited the Pope to meet with Trump. The thing I like the most about Ground News is their charts. Using third-party rankings, they show where each source fits on the political spectrum, how factual each source is, and even how each source is funded. And do you know who else likes Ground News? The Nobel Peace Center. They're the ones who give out the annual Nobel Peace Prize. They called Ground News an excellent way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. So don't wait. Subscribe now by going to ground.news/charts or by using the link in the description or pinned comment. Be sure to use my link so that you can save 40% off unlimited access to their Vantage plan. Let's now return to the Pope's family tree. The next thing I want to do is explain how the family came to use the surname Prevost, because it's a bit of an unusual story, a story that a group called the Genealogy Discord was able to discover after Robert Prevost became the Pope. They released a paper with all the details, which I'll link to in the description. As you can see, both of the Pope's paternal grandparents were immigrants to the U.S. That's what this symbol means. His paternal grandfather came from Italy, whereas his paternal grandmother came from France. Since people from Western countries usually pass surnames along the male line, one would expect that his paternal grandfather would have been born a Prevost, but he was not. He was born in Sicily with the name Salvatore Rigitano. Then, in 1903, at the age of 26, he moved to the United States, eventually settling in Chicago, where he became a well-known music instructor and teacher of French, Italian, and Spanish, even establishing his own school. In 1914, Rigitano married a woman named Daisy Hughes, but just a few years later, in 1917, he was accused of having an affair with another woman named Suzanne Fontaine, something that was actually considered illegal at the time, and for which they were both arrested. They were, however, released, and what do you know? Later that same year, Suzanne Fontaine gave birth to a baby boy at a home for unwed mothers in New York. She listed as the father a man named John Prevost. However, looking back, it's clear that John Prevost was the exact same man as Salvatore Rigitano. Records show that they shared the exact same birth date, and newspapers show that the Rigitano School eventually became known as the Rigitano Prevost School. So yeah, that baby born in 1917, that was the Pope's Uncle John. And Salvatore, well, he left his wife and remained with Suzanne for the rest of his life, having a second child with her, the Pope's father. But why did the Pope's grandfather choose the name Prevost? Well, interestingly, that was the maiden name of Suzanne's mother back in France. The name comes from the Latin prepositus, which means one put in charge, which is quite fitting considering Robert Prevost's new job. Okay, let's now look at Leo XIV's mother's side. Before moving to Chicago, the Pope's maternal grandparents lived in New Orleans, where they were members of the Louisiana Creole community. The word Creole is generally used to refer to people with deep roots in this area that go back to the time before Louisiana became a part of the U.S. You see, prior to 1803, that whole area had been primarily French territory, although it was also ruled by Spain for a time. Over the years, a large portion of people living in French or Spanish Louisiana ended up being of mixed race, usually part French and part African, with perhaps some Spanish and or Native American as well. This is true of several of the Pope's ancestors on his mother's side, which we'll see. Let's start with this man here, Giacomo Martino. He was born in Genoa, Italy, but then immigrated to Louisiana sometime in the 1820s, where he met and married a Creole woman of mixed race. Together, they had a son named Jacques, Jacques being the French equivalent of Giacomo. The surname Martino also became Martinez, which was more common in the Americas. Both Jacques Martinez and his wife, Marie Ramos, are listed in documents as being mulatto or mulatta, words meaning of mixed race. But take note that in the U.S. at the time, any person that was at least 1/8 Black was considered to be a person of color. So it's hard to know exactly how much African descent each one of them had. The Ramos family can be traced back to Cuba, so it's likely that Marie had at least some Spanish ancestry. I'll also point out that Jacques and Marie were known to be holders of enslaved persons of African descent, even though they themselves were part Black, and thus also very likely the descendants of enslaved individuals also. One document has Jacques' occupation listed as sailor, and this might explain why there's some uncertainty over exactly where his son Joseph, the Pope's maternal grandfather, was born. It was probably Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, but some forms have it listed as being either Haiti or Louisiana. Either way, we know that Joseph did end up in New Orleans, where at one point he worked as a cigar maker. There, he met and married Louise Bacquier, although, as I mentioned, the couple later moved to Chicago. Louise was also of a mixed-race Louisiana Creole background. Both of her parents, like Joseph's, are listed on forms using words like colored and mulatto. The Bacquier surname has French origins, and in fact, the Pope's great-great-grandfather, Joseph Bacquier, was born on the French island of Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. He, however, moved to Louisiana, where he married Celeste Lamel, who is listed as having been a free woman of color. This would have been before the U.S. Civil War, which is why her status as a free woman is clearly mentioned. Eugène Grambois was born in France, but then immigrated to Louisiana, where he married Odile Coppel, again a woman of mixed race. So as you can see, the Pope, like most Americans, has quite a diverse ethnic background. If he were to take a DNA test, I'd predict he'd get a result something like this: about 50% French, 35% Italian, 10% African, and around 5% Spanish. On top of this, he also has a strong connection to Peru, having served there for a total of 19 years, even obtaining Peruvian citizenship. Although take note that he also still has his US citizenship as well as Vatican citizenship. Okay, the last thing I want to do is go back to this chart here, which I showed in a previous video. It maps out the Episcopal genealogy of every modern pope, meaning that it shows who consecrated who as bishop, creating lines that, if we had perfect records, should go all the way back to Jesus. We do not, however, have perfect records, and therefore the farthest back we can go is Cardinal Scipione Rebiba, who lived in the 1500s. Like every pope for the last 325 years, Leo XIV also belongs to the Rebiba lineage. However, since he wasn't the pope when I first introduced this chart, let me show you where he now fits. Luckily, this chart, which was made by a fan, was recently updated to include him. So you can see here that he was consecrated by the American Archbishop James Patrick Green, who worked as a Vatican diplomat. He in turn was consecrated by Cardinal Angelo Sodano, who was the dean of the College of Cardinals the year that Pope Francis was elected. If we keep going back, we come to this cardinal, from whom 4 other popes can be traced, and then this cardinal, who was also the episcopal ancestor of Leo XIII, the pope for whom Leo XIV decided to name himself after. Okay, so that was a look at the family tree, both biological and episcopal, of Pope Leo XIV, previously known as Robert Prevost. If you want to follow the news of his papacy, don't forget to sign up for Ground News using the link in the description or pinned comment. Thanks for watching.